Welcome to Housing Developments.
I'm Jim Tobin.
And I'm Paul Lopez.
Yeah, welcome.
Home again.
Yeah. Back in the studio, the friendly confines.
The mothership.
So we got a lot to go over this week, but before we start, let's introduce Ken Wingert, our new Chief Advocacy Officer. Ken, welcome to the NAHB team and welcome to the Housing Developments Podcast.
Absolutely.
Great to be at NAHB and on the podcast.
Yeah,
so.
great to have you. We'll talk a little bit about politics in a minute, but we thought let's talk a little economics as usual, get it out of the way. And
absolutely. And this time around, it all kind of ties in together.
So I think it's appropriate.
Yeah. So we got the Wells Fargo NAHB Housing Market Index today.
That's right.
Up another 2 points, right, to 43, which is okay, going in the right direction.
Yeah, right.
But the thing that stood out the most was the fact that a lot of people still on the sidelines, and a lot of the special questions that we ask, the answers were, we're still waiting on the sidelines to see who's going to win the election because we think there's going to be either incentives or a better environment to build or what have you.
Yeah.
Now that we have both of you here, let's talk about this. I'll start with you, Jim, and kind of get a sense as to, is that a sound reasoning, in terms of what their viewing is?
Yeah, I think I'm going to unpack it in two different ways.
Yeah.
So as I travel around the country and talk to the members who are talking to their customers, there clearly is this pause, right? The interest rates are starting to bring people back into the market, back off the sidelines, but I don't get the sense they're really going to jump in yet. And I think that's twofold. One, we've seen interest rates, drop about a half a point in the last couple months. So why not wait a couple months more? Maybe they fall into that magic fives range. Number one. Number two, I do get the sense that there is this waiting for the politics of the moment to play out. Not hearing much about the incentives when I talk to my builders, but really it's more the uncertainty of who's going to be captaining the economy for the next 4 years. And that's really at least what I'm hearing. So yes, the politics of the moment certainly seem to be, constricting things.
So Ken, and by the way, I know that you got, baptized by fire because your first week was actually during the fall leadership meeting. So you just kind of got thrown into the deep end. So congratulations for surviving that.
Thank you.
What are you thinking here in terms of what you're seeing moving forward in regards to any kind of play that either party might bring in terms of news that might tilt the market anyway?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to Jim's point. I think sometimes the politics of the moment, what the headline is kind of a convenient excuse for people that are maybe waiting for another 50 basis point drop or whatever it's going to be in the interest rates. But I think, there are so many different variables as to, we could have unified government, we could have divided government that could work both ways. And so to me, that speaks to like things happening. If people are expecting, the first 100 days for suddenly we're going to pass all this housing policy that's going to truly change the market, probably going to be disappointed regardless of who you're voting for in the election. That said, I think the fact that housing has been such a top tier issue for the first time in a long time, from both presidential candidates, but clear on down the ballot to Congress and to local elections, really speaks to the angst that's out there around housing supply. And so I think that gives us and our members a lot of opportunity to really put forth the issues that we've been talking about and give us a platform and a receptive audience on Capitol Hill and with whoever the new administration is going to be to really push those issues.
Yeah. So as we're going through to the home stretch of elections, and we're not even 3 weeks.
19 days.
19 days.
Counting.
Who's counting, right?
I mean, it just adds to this imbalance of uncertainty, right? I mean, even the interest rates.
The imbalance of uncertainty.
That's the title of the podcast. I can tell right now.
The imbalance of uncertainty.
My new memoir.
But I mean, even the interest rates have been kind of wonky just because people started jumping into to refinance, and then all of a sudden, things looked a little bit more, peachier down the road, and then it kind of paused. So everything seems kind of out of place right now. But Congress is out, until the election cycle.
Yes,
so
thankfully.
between now and the election, what are we looking here?
Well, I mean, I'll talk from the interest rates perspective. It's going to be bumpy. Is Rob Dietz reported to the membership when in the leadership council when we were in San Antonio? It's going to be a bumpy ride down to the new normal. We do think in 2026 we settle into that 5% range, 5.5%, maybe a little bit lower than that.
Right.
But it's not going to be even, and it's not going to be quick. And we expect the Fed over one of the next 2 meetings to live up to at least its promise of cutting interest rates by another, or the Fed funds funds rate by another half point, another
Right.
50 basis points, and then they've committed to another 100 basis points in 2025. So we've got a long way to go from the Fed's perspective. But in mortgage rates too, they're going to respond a little bit slower. It's not a 1-for-1.
Right.
Everybody knows that. But so as that bumpiness continues, I think the market's going to remain a little bit clunky. People are going to step in, then they're going to step out.
Right.
People are going to try to time the market. We know what a bad idea that is.
Yeah.
So and from the Ken, you said something important I think a minute ago. If anybody's sitting on the sidelines waiting for a $25,000
Credit.
Vice President Harris either a tax credit or a down payment assistance, that will take, number one, they got to flesh out the policy with the new administration. Number two, you got to get it through Congress. If people, it's time to jump in the market or at least start thinking about it, because you're probably going to miss some moments over the next year or so.
Yeah, you never want to time the market here, right?
Yeah, and regardless of who ends up in the majority in either chamber, I think you're looking at another super slim historic. I mean, probably 1 to 2 seats in the Senate, less than a dozen at most in the House, and so we've seen what that's been like over the last couple of years with divided government, and so that could speak to to compromise with the new administration, but it also means that the wheels grind slowly on Capitol Hill, right?
Yeah, so you talked about compromise, obviously a dirty word on both ends of the political spectrum, but kind of really interesting thought that I'd love to bounce off you. Neither candidate, it's so close. Whoever wins is not going to have a mandate. But given the politics of the moment, it seems like, and there's such competing visions for the future.
Yeah.
Do you think that they both, whoever wins comes out and says, I've got a mandate and this is the way the world's going to be, because the issues are so stark that if they win, they won on those issues?
I think one candidate will say they have a mandate because
That's
President Trump is very good at saying big picture things like that.
Right.
I don't know that the vice president would necessarily say that. I think it does depend on what they're looking at on Capitol Hill, right? If there's a sweep and Republicans have control of all three levers, they're gonna take that as a mandate, whether it's a mandate or not. If you have divided government, then that's probably a little bit, and again, back to a slim majority. I think that's a little less thing, but I think one thing that I can predict with fairly good certainty is even if Vice President Harris ends up winning the presidency, she's definitely probably going to have a Republican Senate, and trying to get even just the basics of nominations for cabinets through the Senate is going to grind the Senate to a very slow crawl in the first 3 or 4 months if that's the scenario that we're in, regardless of what's happening in the House. So I think that also buys time for tax bills. If you remember how a bill becomes a law, technically have to originate in the House. So with with maybe a lead into the tax cliff that's going to come next year, like that gives them time, regardless of whether it's Democrats or the Republicans, to kind of get their ducks in a row into how they want to start approaching that. And to some degree, more so the Republicans at this point, I think they've set up working groups. They've already started to look at and put plans in place that if they do get that magic, moment of reconciliation like they had in 2017, that they can really try to move quickly.
Right. So let's talk about two different things here real quickly. So obviously NAHB is not standing still. We between now and the election, we're getting our members out there, making sure that it's important to get our issues out to the public, in addition to the candidates, right? And whether it's not just here in D.C., it's definitely more important actually in the state and local level at this point, right? So talk a little bit about what we talked, what our members did in fall leadership. We actually created kind of a campaign.
We did.
So why don't you talk about that, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, and this is kind of the political portion of the 10-point plan that we put out in the spring. That's policy focused, but let's be honest. While we are talking some policy, it's high level, and this is the grind of the campaign. We're down to days now. Yeah. Well, I guess we've always been down to days, but we're down to fewer days than normal. But we launched a campaign, Let Builders Build, and that's critically important for us. I mean, we build, we vote. That's the other side of the sign. Literally, the other side of the sign. We build, we vote. And I think it's with housing being at the top of the agenda, the economic agenda, and not just housing, but more housing supply. There's only one association and one membership that's going to build the housing in this country, and that's us.
Right.
And so what a great opportunity for our members to get out there and show the fact that they are a political power, and that they are prepared to meet the moment, and have policy solutions to being able to meet the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, Ken, you kind of teed up something else, something that you addressed, or we addressed at NAHB at Fall Leadership, was this tax cliff that's going on. So first of all, explain to everybody what that is and why it's so important and why we're involved.
Yeah, so the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was enacted in 2017, or sometimes known as the Trump tax cuts that went through, made a lot of structural changes. The standard deduction was greatly increased. The state and local tax decreased in terms of what you could deduct, and there was a lot of business incentives for builders, like pass-through deductions and other things that were enacted as part of that. Because of the way that was done, all of those things are set to sunset at the end of 2025. So regardless of the outcome of the election, there is a deadline that Congress and the new president is going to have to meet, because otherwise we revert back to what was essentially 2016 law, and that creates never mind the corporate side of it and all the things that go into that. I mean, rates change, there's just a lot of mess that happens. It's mayhem. It's a cliff.
Dogs
it's mayhem.
and cats living together. We'll wrap the
however you want
stuff.
to. Yes. It's so again, back to folks starting to think and plan and advocate now. If you're waiting until next May, the ship's already leaving, or the train, or whatever you want to whatever metaphor you want to use. A couple things that we've been doing is using our great economic research team to kind of look at the impact of some of those provisions and what those would mean in terms of expiration, just from a member business standpoint. But back to this debate of supply side, demand side, what do we need? What's the balance? The mortgage interest deduction was greatly diminished in its effectiveness because of that increase in standard deduction and some other caps in 2017. And so, do we need to be looking at a home ownership tax credit that is, encompasses not just mortgage interest, but, property taxes
right.
and the other expenses that go into owning a home? And how do you use that to incentivize the right, first-time buyers or the missing middle, if you will, that is really where we're having the supply crunch. So, and then there's obviously been other proposals out there on a builder credit or a lower income credit. So a lot of different moving parts, and that's where our policy team and our advocacy team is really kind of putting in the work now,
right.
To make sure that, and also meeting with members and getting their feedback. So we're in a good position to go advocate, hit the ground running. We've already met with the campaigns, to set us up to meet with work with the transition team, whoever is the the presumptive president.
Right.
So we're influencing that policy before those people are even in place in January.
Right.
And we really, we're starting right now because it's so important. And we're going to be doing some webinars.
Mm-hmm.
Last week of October, we have these set up so people can go to nhb.org, type in either tax reform or tax cliff, whichever one.
Right.
It'll get you to the page. We advise sign up, at least get an understanding of what's going on, because this is going to be a critical, mission through 2025.
Yeah, and not only will every potential homeowner or home buyer be affected, but I would say every NAHB member is going to be affected in their business in some way beyond just the the home ownership credits that we tend to focus on.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we're wrapping up here. So, do I dare ask for predictions? This is about the time that we start asking about what's going on in the House, the Senate, and El Grande.
Yeah, I'm
ready?
Yeah, sure. Ken
right.
can go first.
All right,
my prediction is that we will not know the outcome of the presidential election or the House until at least 5 to 7 days after the election. So
5 to 7 days.
People are going to be in for a wait. We kind of went through that last time. Back to the beginning of this conversation about market uncertainty, both in the housing market and the stock market. I think you're going to see a lot of volatility for those people that are looking for clear direction. It is just so close in. The House is going to be decided decided by less than 30 seats because of gerrymandering and the way things are now.
Sure.
And if you look at the battleground states, it all comes down to turnout. And both campaigns, I think you've seen a shift in the last couple of weeks as to you can kind of tell where they're trying to shore up their base and drive turnout in not only in the states that they're going to, but kind of in the voters that they're targeting with their, with Harris's media campaign and kind of some of the stuff that the Trump people have been doing on the ground. So that was an effective dodge back to Jim in terms of I will stand by my Republicans take the Senate prediction, but House is a coin flip, I think, at this point, as is the presidential.
Senate up 2, up 1. Okay, 3 would be a little rough, but
I think West Virginia, barring some
miracle.
crazy act of God, I think West Virginia is in the bag, which gets it to even in terms of the Republican pickup there. I think John Tester is in serious trouble in Montana, a race that we've been involved in, and then I think my sleeper right now is Michigan with Mike Rogers and Alyssa Slotkin. I think as goes whoever, I think the presidential winner there will have some coattails that really may drive it across. There's just not a lot of ticket splitting. Ohio is fascinating because Sherrod Brown has had his own independent brand, and to a lot of degree, a lot of his base is the Union Hall kind of Trump supporters, and to the extent he can still convince them to go. I mean, if anyone has been a political survivor, it has been Sherrod Brown in Ohio, and I think that's.
You think that holds? Come on, Ken. I gotta hold you to the fire.
I actually think it does. I actually think it does. But
unless Trump shows up in Ohio and he blows
it by 14 points. Or
he's gonna win 7. But you're right. If it's 10 or 12, that hurts Sherrod Brown. And Trump doesn't. He's gonna win Ohio, so he doesn't spend any time there. Which means he hasn't walked up there and said, "I need you to vote for Bernie Moreno for me." Right. Give me a working majority. So I wonder if that does change in the stretch run. It is. I agree with you. I think Sherrod Brown survives. I mean, it's right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you both think that the House flips?
I do. I'm going to stay consistent and say the House flips Democrat by less than 10 votes. The new majority is less than 10.
Yeah.
I'm with Ken. I think it's probably 1 vote in the Senate. Maybe 2, but I don't. I like that sleeper pick. But Nebraska's gotten really squirrely for the Republicans all of a sudden. Ted Cruz is up 1 or 2 points and should be a predictable race for him. So I still think they pull it out, right? It just seems, that would.
If we've learned anything over the past 3 to 4 cycles is that the polls are always wrong, and it's just a question of to what degree and the margin of error. And so and if there's this late break, and I feel like we're in such a more partisan moment than you think. 1980 to go way back in political history. I mean, polls showed like a 1 to 2 point race, right, and then Reagan has a blowout. Like I think those days are probably behind us and where our politics are, but not out of realm of the possibility if you get everybody breaks in one direction that that there's a larger than expected electoral college win, and then you have some of those coattails that go along. I think the interesting thing in the House is a lot of the competitive seats are in traditional blue territory of California and New York, and so again to turn out, I think we were having a different conversation 3 or 4 months ago when it was still President Biden at the top of the ticket in terms of what the Democratic enthusiasm is in those states, and I do kind of agree with you in terms of where the pickup opportunities lie for the Democrats.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point about the polls, right? I mean, Trump tends to under poll. They have not, the pollsters have not quite figured out how much bump to give them behind the scenes in order to, and so if it's a 1 point race, the question is Trump sitting on 2 points that nobody knows about, in which case it does become that blowout, and all then if he's got 2 or 3 points in his pocket, then he probably sweeps all of, and this looks like 2016, not 2020. And I think that's a really interesting, but who knows?
Or have the pollsters over-indexed to try to make up for that deficit that they've had in the last couple, and then now Harris is sitting on 2 points that no one sees, right?
Yeah, that's
so
right.
That's right. Could cut both ways.
Yeah.
All right. God,
Yeah.
We're like-
I'm trying to.
We're like
lock you
Dr.
down here,
Dietz, the two-handed economist,
I
right?
won't-
Like it's on one hand
we
and on
get
the
that.
other hand. Yeah.
You're in good company. I have refused to make a prediction in the presidential race. I think, I guess, if I'm telling everybody, if you gave me your money, I still wouldn't bet with it. I think it's going to be a fascinating 9 days after the
truly.
election. You know.
Yeah, I don't believe Texas turns blue or purple or whatever. Allred's a good candidate, but I just don't see him. I see Cruz squeaking out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more Allred's a good candidate, right?
Yeah.
I think it's more whether Cruz has gotten too much of a national profile and less of a Texas profile.
Yeah.
And I think it's more of a Cruz problem than it is an Allred problem.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, when we were in San Antonio watching the ads on TV, it was pretty impressive. I mean, Allred is compelling.
Sure.
Obviously.
Yeah, I will say, while ticket splitting has gone away, undervote is still a real thing. There's still a lot of people in a presidential year that go in, vote the top of the ticket, and leave everything else blank. And so, in a situation like that in Texas, where Trump should win handily, folks just for whatever reason decide not to check the box down the line. So,
All right, Jim. So you're telling me you're still not going to give me a presidential prediction?
Great.
So that means you're not going to give me a presidential prediction.
no. Just that we're going to be waiting.
I think it's that close. I think it's. I have no feel for the race. 2 months ago, different Ray, feel different yesterday than it did today. Every day there's a new set of polls that come out.
Right.
And you've been traveling a lot. You're outside the Beltway bubble even more than
you sit with our members and you ask, okay, how many people think Trump's going to win? It's always yes, right? And so I'm like, well, that can't be true, right? It doesn't matter where I am. So, except for Puerto Rico, which Puerto Rico doesn't have a vote in the presidential race,
but they're still there.
Yeah, they get to vote in the primary, so you get to pick the candidates, but they don't actually get to vote on. I think we need to change that. That doesn't seem very fair.
That's another episode.
Yeah, that's right. Another episode. Voting rights in Puerto Rico. But and before we go, let's make sure we give a shout out to our great sponsor,
LG Pro Builder.
Let's build a good life together. So thank them for being with us on the podcast.
Absolutely.
And great to have them when we were in San Antonio live with us. Great company that's doing great things and look forward to a great partnership into the new year.
Yeah. And Ken, welcome and congratulations.
Yeah, we're happy to have you on board.
Yeah, great to be here. Been super impressed with both the members and the staff, and three weeks of deep end immersion between the fall leadership meetings, and we just wrapped up our budget meetings here. So getting a feel for the place really quickly.
Yeah, we're lucky to have you on board, and thanks again for joining the team, man. That's great.
All right, with that,
until next time. I'm Jim Tobin,
and I'm Paul Lopez,
and I'm Ken Wingert.
Take care.
Bye.